To me, there's a clear-cut difference between an explanation and an excuse. Now, sometimes that line can be blurred a little bit, but I do think you could still make the distinction between an explanation and an excuse. Now, too often, I think in the business world, if something doesn't happen or you don't get the job done on something and you present a reason why, it is too often viewed as an excuse and just a way to try and take away responsibility or accountability for you not getting the job done. I look at, let's say, a sales environment. Let's say your goal is 50% higher than it was maybe 3 months ago, and all the while your traffic for your sales job, whatever it might be, your customer base is 10, 15, 20% smaller. Well, you're being expected to produce so much more than you were in the past with a dwindling or decreasing customer base. At the end of the day, you're probably not going to achieve that goal. You're probably not even going to get close to that goal. In fact, it'd be a challenge even to get to the old goal that was 50% less than what it currently was. Now, in a sales environment, of course, any justification or any explanation that is logical or legitimate that you give, like, hey, our customer base is going down, you're not doing anything to drive customers to us, and yet you're expecting us to produce at a higher level than you ever had, something doesn't just add up here. It doesn't make sense. Instead of that company taking accountability or responsibility for what is going on, they will just look at it and say, no, you need to perform anyways. That's an excuse. Start holding yourself accountable and do a better job. Whereas an excuse might be, the goal is the same or 10% higher than it was a couple of months ago. Your customer base increases by 20% or 30%, but yet you still fail to meet that goal and you give things like weather or this or that, just kind of some bullshit. That's something that is more excuse making. And I get with TNA that, they're not the WWE. Frankly, they're never going to be the WWE. Frankly, they're never going to be in the WWE's ballpark or stratosphere. I understand that. And I think that is in large part due to them and what they have done, and in a lot of cases haven't effectively done over the past 12 years. But to me, there is one excuse above all else that just isn't tolerable anymore. There is one excuse that I personally am not buying. Now, TNA will sit there and try and tell you, and the people associated with TNA will try and tell you that this is an explanation or a legitimate reason. But at the end of the day, I think it's the poorest cop out and the cheapest excuse they could possibly use, and that is the fact that they're a new company. They're not the WWE. They haven't been around since the 50s or the 60s. They're still new at it. They've only been around for 10, 12 years. So that explains this, and that explains that, and that explains this, and that explains that. And to me, that is the cheapest form of bullshit cop out I could possibly imagine. You see internet startups all the time and startup companies all the time that are successful right out of the gate, that a few years later, the original founder or owner is able to sell it for a huge profit and be able to go retire or do whatever the hell you want. Are they supposed to sit there and say, well, we're going to struggle and not make it initially because we're new at this? No, that's bullshit. Complete and total bullshit. Look at all the television shows that you see that are successful right out of the gate, that get it done and done right out of the gate. Is it okay for them to sit there and say, hey, you know what? We're new to this sitcom or this drama or this comedy is probably going to take, 2 or 3 years to really establish an audience. Well, it just doesn't work like that. You don't have that crutch of saying we're new to this or this actor's new to that or this story is new to the audience. If you don't produce and you don't produce results quickly and instantaneously almost, your show will end up being canceled. But yet, for the past 12 years now, it seems to be the ultimate of crutches and the ultimate of excuses for TNA that, hey, we're new at this. So we can't do this and we can't do that. And at the end of the day, I look at this and I say, you know what? All you're doing is trying to justify the crap that you do, or in a lot of cases, the crap that you can't do. And you are trying to make excuses and pass the buck and not take accountability. And at some point in time, you have to be able to be realistic and take accountability. And this whole logic of TNA being a new company 12 years later, they still aren't able to do this or aren't able to do that. That shouldn't even be in the discussion anymore. That shouldn't even be in the conversation anymore. It took WCW what? When it actually was bought by Ted Turner and became WCW, that old Crockett territory. It took them what? 8 years to not only become a big time national and international wrestling brand, but to surpass the WWF in the ratings on a consistent week in, week out basis. They were doing multiple times the number of people watching their product, going head to head against a WWF product, when TNA is doing a fraction of that, going against a WWE product that isn't all that strong. It's just not a good excuse. I look back to the days of the WCCWs and the ECWs. Think about ECW when Heyman took full creative control in '94. And they really went in that extreme championship wrestling direction instead of the Eastern championship wrestling direction. Talk about '93, '94. By the time you got to '97, they were doing major pay-per-views and doing nice pay-per-view revenues from that. A couple of years later, they had the national television that was doing just as good, if not better ratings, without any support on the old Spike TV, which used to be TNN, than anything TNA has ever done. This excuse just falls flat on its face. You have been in the business for 12 years, and you still are struggling to draw 200 or 300 people consistently to your fucking live events. You hardly get anybody to buy your actual legit pay-per-views. When you do a pay-per-view, you're lucky to get 800 or 1,000 people there. 12 years later, you are still filming your shows at an amusement park studio. These are not things that you could blame on age. These are not things that you could pass off on the times or on the people. These are the things that, as a company, TNA has to take responsibility for and stop using as a crutch and stop making excuses for. You have been in the business for 12 effing years now. 12 of them. By year 8 of WCW being WCW, they were the kings of professional wrestling, dominating the WWF in the ratings. Within a half decade of ECW being in its current form and existence, they were able to get pay-per-views that put to rest and embarrass any pay-per-view numbers TNA has ever done, not to mention they had their own national television as well. You're also talking about a company here, for Christ's sakes, that for the past several years has had major national cable television abilities through Spike TV. Prime time, 2 hours every freaking Thursday night. And yet, 12 years later, we hear this bullshit like I saw something that Vince Russo recently wrote, and it matches what so many other people have used as a crutch and an excuse. Oh, we can't do this because of this. They have to record several shows at once because of this, and they can't draw because of that, and skippity skip and a whoopity woo. Well, who fucking made the problem to begin with? Who's the one that lacked the long-term vision to really enable some consistent growth and movement up the mountain, so to speak, and moving the needle in the other direction? TNA did. So how can you sit there all these years later and still use your age and your youth and your inexperience as a freaking excuse? This would be like an NFL quarterback saying, well, I'm still figuring it out, and that's why I haven't reached my full potential, when they've been in the league for 12 damn years. That age shit doesn't work anymore. That's a piss poor excuse if I've ever heard one. You are what you are, and you've created what you've created. And it's time to own up to that, and it's time to stop passing the buck, stop using this crutch, stop making excuses, and do something about it. Get better. Market, promote, and advertise your God-blessed product. Have some goddamn business sense. Create a better, more captivating, compelling wrestling television product that people will actually want to watch. This whole thing of being a new company, this week's Impact drew less than 1 million viewers. Whereas 4 or 5 years ago, they were at least getting, 1.3, maybe 1.4, 1.5 million viewers, maybe a little bit more. So that, again, just smacks in the face any logic that they're trying to use here, saying that their youth as a company should still be used as a crutch all these years later. No, it's not. It's a pathetic attempt by TNA and their management and the people running the show to pass the buck and take any accountability that they need to take, which is a lot, and pass it off and excuse it to try and justify the pathetic things that they have done. You have been in existence for 12 effing years now. You have national cable prime time television and in an age of the internet and social media, the fact that TNA, all these years later, this past week on Impact, can't even draw 1 million damn viewers, that's pathetic. And has absolutely nothing to do with the age of the company. It has everything to do with the bullshit they have done over the years. It has everything to do with the piss poor marketing, promotion, and advertising of the product over the years. It has everything to do with running away the guys that were once associated with your brand. It has everything to do with, for so many years, focusing on all the old WCW, WWF/E, and ECW rejects and pushing them like they were the greatest thing ever, even though these other companies either A, aren't in existence anymore, or B, didn't want anything to do with these guys anymore, so they didn't care if they went to fucking TNA. It's all this other stupid crap. It's all this other bullshit. When people lobby and, lodge legitimate complaints and criticisms and critiques of this company, the people involved with the company do everything they can to spin it away as if you don't know, and you don't know this, and you don't know that. Well, looking at TNA, clearly they don't know pretty much any fucking thing. So who the hell are they to tell anybody that they don't know? Because clearly when you're on the outside looking in, you don't have to be in the inner workings to see whether or not a company is run very well or not. Do I need to be on the inner circle of Sears and Kmart to know that that is a piss poor run company if you've ever fucking seen one? No, I don't think so. Do you need to be on the inside to know whether or not an iPhone works well or an Android phone works well? No, I don't fucking think you do. It is high time that TNA stops using this pathetic crutch and this excuse. This is not acceptable. And it's not helping anything. You are only hindering and hurting yourselves even more by failing to own up to your mistakes and addressing them effectively and affecting some real positive change. You're just falling back into that same old kind of negative Nelly. Well, we can't do this because we're new. We can't do that because we're new. No, you can't do things because of the bullshit that you do. Not because of how long you've been around. I hate when people actually try to sit there and use this as an excuse or as a crutch for a justification for TNA and the position that they're in. They've been around for over a decade now. At some point in time, that new company shit goes out the door. If TNA was around for another 20 years, they're still going to use that new company bullshit compared to the WWE because we've only been around for 30 years and the WWE's been around for 75 or so. People, stop accepting this bullshit from TNA. Start demanding some real positive change. And the people in TNA most especially, stop accepting this bullshit. Stop believing in this bullshit. Stop using it as a crutch. And do the things necessary. Do the right things to affect some positive change to improve your company and hopefully help save it. Idiots.